looking for Trent Wise and the maintainers. Trent Wise, class number 2 of the maintainers. You need to be reporting to the stage area.
Fantastic way to start off the maintainers show. Both these females are of quality, and the young people need to be commended. And I think when you sort the pair, in my mind, this female that goes ahead and leads off does so in terms of being impeccable in her structural base. She's so fluid in her joints. She's soft in her body shape. She's still got an adequate amount of muscle shape down her top and out of her hip with an exceptional look from the side. I really like this female coming in second. She's soft-haired. She's neat through her front 1/3. She ties her neck high into a point of her shoulder. Today, I'd like to see her go just a shot better out of her hip and hind leg, be a little softer through her mid-rib and flank. Two awfully nice females. Congratulate them both.
So over here on the Leedey side, man, there's a lot of give and take, and I would certainly say, and I've mentioned it a couple times today as we keep going deep into this was a very good class of steers. I think we were 8 deep, maybe 7 or 8 deep. I didn't count them. And with that being said, as much as I like this one I'm starting with, I'd like to make him move a little freer. I love the way this heifer blends on the back side of his shoulder. I like the way he lays into his shoulder. He's good through his center body. He's got some muscle shape and dimension that carries down. He's got some width in his chest. He's got some width behind his back too. And the way he's designed standing there, you'd think this thing would go like a cougar, and he doesn't, quite honestly. I'd like to see, well, if he led a little better, I think I'd get a little better idea, but he don't exactly flex those back hocks like I think is optimum. Standing still, there's no steer in this ring that can rival him, in my opinion. And again, standing still, you would never guess that maybe he comes up just a little bit short, but I really do like that calf. I admire the way he's put together. This is a little bit of a problem steer for me. I like the steer. He doesn't lay in his shoulder nearly as good as the steer that's going to win this class. He's a little smaller footed kind of a steer. Good enough out of the backside of his shoulder. I guess his top line doesn't blend together near as nice as the steer that beats him. Big-ended. He's a steer that's, I think, adequate in his structure, but a steer that when I compare him to the one steer, it gets a little rounder in that shoulder. I just don't like the way he lays in that shoulder is good. I don't like him in his top line is good, but a very, very high-quality steer. The black steer that comes out next, this steer here, I don't know if he's quite as good in his lower stifle. He's probably adequate when he moves, and he doesn't want to move, and it's a little bit of a challenge to read exactly what I'm looking at. Very, very good-looking steer. I think he's good behind his shoulders. I think he's wide enough in his base. I think it matches up with his overall dimension. Just a really good cattle. I think his structure's sound enough, but like I said, when they don't lead good enough, it's hard for me to just pin my hat on that. The steer that comes out next, possibly the boldest middle steer of the 4 steers on the top end of this class. If I could steer a little different, he gets a little rounder in his shoulder. He gets a little tight shoulder. Steer that comes out next, the yellow, he gets a little flatter in his overall design, doesn't have as mate, but even with that being said, I think his rib cage is a little flatter. I think he sits a little lower in his chest, maybe runs downhill just ever so slightly, but that's a really, really nice calf. The golds here, man, gold seems to be the color in demand today. We've seen a lot of cattle like this. As we view him, as far as his show ring presence, I admire his width of skull and his overall dimension. He's got a lot of hip shape out behind him, but he's a steer as you see him. He gets just a little plainer and a little weaker in his top line, just doesn't tie together quite as well as some cattle above him. And then the steer that comes out next, the steer that just gets a little narrower based. He gets a little narrower on both ends, gets a little higher in his flank, just not as much true shape and dimension under the hide of that calf as over was above him. You see him go in motion, he gets a little bit tight on those back hocks.
Here in our next class of maintainers, 3 females that are all different kind, and I'm not going to tell you that any of them are bulletproof in any one area. I think when you step back and you just study them for what they are, the most complete, best-bodied, freest-moving female is the one we're going to lead off with. She's one that we sure like to see softer down her top and probably better into her tail head, but when she relaxes, she's still the best in terms of the angle to her shoulder and how she moves out of her hip and hind leg. This black female is really typey in her kind. She's one that blends smooth from forward to flank, but to me, I'd like to make her stronger right behind her shoulder. She needs to have more genuine width if we study her throughout. Smoky female is really moderate in her type and kind. She's big-boned, big-footed type of female. I think today she needs to put it together in a better balance package. She's a shot open into her shoulder. I'd like to see her square, more muscular out of her hip and hind leg.
On the limousine side in the heifer ring, class number 2. 6th place went to Kyron Rodriguez. 5th place went to Blake Jansen. 4th place, Mason Allen. 3rd place, Jack Hornberger. 2nd place, Bailey Page. And 1st place, Kylie Dodd. In the heifer ring in the maintainer class number 2, 3rd place went to Tatum Bixby. 2nd place, Weston Johnson. And 1st place, Jenna Donaldson. We are looking for Joe Gacante and Parker Lockhart, classes 4 and class 5 of the maintainers. Joe and Parker be making your way to the makeup pen in the maintainer on the heifer side.
Nice class here in the maintainer show, led off by one that wins pretty easily in my mind. She embodies stout cow shape from a rib shape perspective. She's the flexible female that's the best balanced. She's the freshest, most feminine. From there, I think it gets challenging, and my personal preference lies to the better bodied, more moderate female that sets down on a bigger foot. She's heavier boned, just more female there when you stand in behind her. This female that rounds out the class is just greener in her build. When you really study her in terms of rib shape, she just needs to be softer from forward to flank, have more width when we stand in view from behind. 3 nice females. Give them a round of applause.
Last call for Joe Gacante. Last call for Joe. Class number 4 of maintainers. Class number 5, be ready.
So in this Limmy class, the combination cattle, the calf that blends everything together, and he's kind of a combination of the two behind him is the deep red steer here. I think this steer is really, really nice the way he's constructed. He's real practical. He's real good behind his shoulders. He's a steer. When she gets him set and puts his top down, I think he's good enough in his hip. Is he the biggest ended Limmy I've seen in this drive? He's not. Is he adequate? I'd say he's certainly adequate. Good through his center body. I think he's really sound. I think he's just an obvious place where to start in this trio of steers. The steer that comes second in this class, I'm not going to lie to you, it's really hard for me to read this steer. He's fighting that noselead, and I can tell he's got a little bit of ornery in his eye. I'd say that calf probably give you all you want if you didn't have that thing in him. When he gets stopped and decides to relax just a little, that's a good calf. He's nice up in his crest. He's a steer that's got some true shape and design. The part that gets so hard to read on him is when he walks, he's more concerned about that noser in his nose, so he tends to want to get his top up, and I'm not exactly certain what I'm seeing, but when he relaxes, I do like what I'm seeing. I think he's good at the ground. He carries a lot of muscle and shape down into his hock, into his lower one-third. The steer that comes out third reminds me a lot of the steer that stood fourth in the last class. Admirable through the center part of his body. In fact, to the degree he's so big in the middle of his body, it tends to make him look a little tight behind his shoulder, with a little shoulder, and the way that rib shape is so bold and pronounced and then so deep, he looks high-flanked. When they look high-flanked, they look high-flanked, and it tends to shorten up their hip look. Just a really nice cattle. As far as overall body shape and dimension, he's the biggest barreled, biggest bodied steer of the three, to be sure. It just takes away from his overall look. Just a really nice trio of steers. A little bit tough to sort.
Class number 3, the maintainers. Third place went to Cash Bixby. Second went to Rustin Fraser. And first went to Rylan Fleener. On the limousine, class number 3, third place went to Ellie Solis. Second went to Jace Jordan. And first went to Skylar Sturgeon. We're looking at class number 4 of the limousines now. Fourth and final class, Main Anjou. Please report to the steer warm-up pen. Main Anjou steers, be getting ready. This is class 5 of the maintainers in the heifer ring as well.
In our final class of limmies, we've ended the drive with a really nice black steer, tremendous in his barrel. The most noteworthy thing of him is the way his rib cage comes out of his spine. He's so nice and out around. He's got some true shape to his hip. He's got some depth of body. He's got some bone. He's a steer, as I put him in motion, he wants to get it plenty tight when he goes. I'd like to soften him up at the ground. But man, oh man, that thing, you're not going to find one designed much better from the top of his spine out around, really good and stout in his hip. If I could free him up in his motion, it's probably something I would want to do to make it an optimum, but really a nice calf to end up this drive. We'll get him back out here and compare him against his peers.
And Samantha Graves is going to win class number 4 of the limousines. We're looking at class number 5 in the maintainers. In the heifer ring, we will bring back all of our champion limousines, or winning limousines, to decide who the breed champion will be.
A really nice nice class of maintainers, led off by this Brockle female that's the most feminine in her look. She's the freshest fronted, biggest bodied, soundest structured one that balances up the best in my mind from a composition standpoint. From there, I thought the decision became quite a bit harder, and I can see probably switching it ever so often. I elected to use the more moderate, sounder, flexible female. She's better in the angle to her shoulder. When you watch her go away, she feels her track more appropriate. She's square out of her pins. Big, stout female here, and I really tie into her from a muscle shape standpoint. She's square down her top and out of her hip. Big, heavy bone. Probably today gets a little flatter into her forerib. I'd like to see her stronger down her top. Move better when we really set her into motion off of her hip and hind leg. Nice three females. Let's give them a hand.
In the final class of maintainers, fourth place goes to Parker Lockhart. Third place goes to Kelton Dowdle. Second place goes to Champ Davis. And first place goes to Reagan Wilborn. We'll bring back all of our winning maintainers to decide the breed champion.
Let's put our hands together for these four young ladies with exceptional class winners as we think through picking a champion maintainer. I think, again, if you kind of study them all, not that they all look alike in this particular lineup. We just started strong with the heifer calf from just a balance and a structure perspective, and we went all the way down to the Brockle female that we described out of our last class, being the fresh, big-bodied, good-footed one. I'm going to take one more look, and I'll get you a couple champions, but let's congratulate them.
So I wrap up for our limousine drive, the black steer that wins that first class. Really nice in his design. Got a little extra navel under him and just a little extra chest under him for this stage of his career. He's still got quite a ways to go weight-wise to get him to a kill weight. But just really nice. What's deceiving about this calf is he looks like he's really hairy, and he does have some hair, but he has no guard hair whatsoever. So when he walks away, his hip just screams at you. He's got a lot of top and a lot of hip. Could I clean him up in his undercarriage? I could, ever so slightly. I feel like he wants to bow on that left hock, and I think he wants to get up on his ankles. Not always, but every once in a while. As far as the way this gold one's designed, I don't know what's really left to be desired as far as the way God made this calf. He's a calf that's beautiful in his design. He's sharp-headed. He's sharp the way his neck comes out of his shoulder. shoulder, certainly adequate through the center part of his body. He's got some hip shape and dimension. Yeah, his tail head sits in him just ever so slightly a little higher than what's optimum. When he stands still, you would just bet the ranch that when he goes in motion, he can do so just exactly like you'd like. And that's probably, truthfully, not the case. I'd like to see him go a little better, to be quite honest. I think more than anything, he wants to drag on that halter, and he kind of doesn't flex that hock. I think his angles at the ground are real good. I just don't think he flexes his hock as good as he should. The red steer that comes out of the third class, just a really complete kind of a steer. He doesn't have as much hip shape as the steer in front of him, to be sure, but just a really, really good calf. He tends to want to duck down in his pins just ever so slightly. Young lady, you want to keep that top down on that calf when you set him up. That's a really, really good calf. And then the black steer that come out in a single class, tremendous through his barrel. He's the best coming out of the top of his spine, the way he comes out around. Good-looking rascal. He's a steer, though, when he comes in the ring and when he comes back in. He's certainly too restricted in his hock and down at his ankles. Most often, he wants to get up and around on his ankles. Am I going to tell you that my champion Leedey is going to be that I'm incredibly comfortable with? I think there's a flaw in each one of these that I would like to change, and I'm just admitting that going in. There's one out here that's designed, I think, as good as you could design one, and I think I'm just going to have to live with the fact that I think the structure could be a little better on this calf. I certainly like the way he was put together. With that being said, we'll wrap up this drive.
A really nice way to get started in the Red Angus show. This heifer calf comes out. She's long and extended, flat in her shoulder, good out of her hip. Probably one that's just greener in her build, as most of these calves have been. We'd just like to see her pulled apart a little bit more. Let's give her a nice round of applause as we get started in the Red Angus. Another single entry here in the Red Angus heifer show, one that's adequate in her body shape. She's parallel on her lines, square out of her hip. I'd like to see her go better out of her hip and hind leg, be square from hock to ground.
On the steer side in the limousine, your reserve breed champion, Skylar Sturgeon. Breed champion goes to Kylie Dodd. We're looking for Benjamin Edwards. Benjamin Edwards in the Red Angus on the heifer side. Red Angus heifer, it's been a long day. Red Angus heifer, Benjamin Edwards. Please report to the makeup area. Main Anjou, we are going to you on the steer side.
Another high-quality single-entry Red Angus female. This one, I think, of the ones we've seen, is the best balanced. She's the most flexible. She sets down on the best shape to her foot. She's still strong and level down her top and out of her hip. Congratulate that young man with a round of applause.
For both of them, or just that? Last call for Benjamin Edwards. Last call for Benjamin Edwards in the Red Angus. Main Anjou, we're going to you.
So this young lady brings us a really cool black and white heifer to start out our main drive. Man, she couldn't be made much better. Phenotypically, she's really extended up through her front end. She's real square and level out in her hip, real nice in her center body, really big bone. You brought us a really nice heifer to start this drive. Congratulations.
Young lady brings us another really nice Red Angus female that's sensibly sized. She's flexible in her lower joints. You gotta like her volume, her depth of body. She's been the widest pinned, heaviest bone female. Let's give her a nice round of applause.
And Kaylee Schilling's going to win class number 4 in the Red Angus on the heifer side. As we look to the main Anjou, class number 1, Emery Chamberlain is going to win that class. We'll move on to class number 2. All main Anjou steers, please report to the makeup area. All main Anjou steers, please report to the makeup area.
Well, we started the mains with a single steer, and now we got a pair here, and just a really nice pair. When they come at you in the lighting, they look like they're really, really quite similar, and I guess in certain ways they are. They're both big back cattle. They're both good rib cattle. I think the differentiating factors for me, I think they're both on a level playing field as far as their bone structure and their bone makeup. I think both cattle go just good enough at the ground, but the separating factor for me is the true shape and design from the hip down to where he's stifling his lower 1/3. I think this calf is a little truer carrying back into his flank, and I think as I view him from front and rear, there's just a little more base width in this steer. So there's just a little more true shape and design. Both are great looking cattle, great phenotype cattle that are good enough in their rib shape. I just think under that hide, there's a little more true shape and design under the in the lower 1/3 of the first place calf. Really nice pair. That's what differentiates. And I also think the first place steer is probably just a tick tighter in her chest floor, his chest floor. I don't think that it's his chest floor so much that it doesn't run up into his throat latch as much as the steer that comes second in this class. Really nice pair. That's what differentiates the two for me.
In class number 2 of the main Anjou, second place goes to Blake Miller. J.C. Vega is going to win class number 2. We are looking at class number 5 Red Angus heifers right now.
A trio of nice females that are opposite in their type and kind, and I can see where you could probably form some different opinions. And I think today, how I go with it, the fresh, feminine female that's the best bodied, she's still the best structured, and when you get behind her, she's the most muscular and the widest based, and I appreciate all those things about her. You put enough positives together, and she wins this class quite handily, I think. And then you go from there back. I really like the depth from rear rib to flank in this female. She's strong in her top. It's probably more of a issue. She's a little heavier condition, and when she wants to get out and move, she wants to roll out of her shoulder. We'd like to see her go better out of her hip and hind leg. Really big-footed, heavy-bone, muscular female that comes next. I like all that about her. She's probably one that needs to tie her neck higher into a point of her shoulder. She needs to be stronger down her top, out of the back side of her shoulder. Just put it together in a better balanced package. Three nice females. Let's give them a hand.
Class number 5, Red Angus, Grady Schilling takes third place, Caitlin Skiles takes second, and Cade Sweeney takes the win in class number 5.
As we get into the older females in the Red Angus show, this female is really nice. Her abundance of ribs. She's got some stout cow shape from a muscularity standpoint when you stand in to view her from behind. Again, she's probably one at this stage of the game to me is getting a little cresty over the top of her neck. You'd like to see her cleaner at the base of her chest, but a good stout cow for that young lady. This young lady brings us a unique power cow in my mind. Heavier bred, she's really fresh, she's good haired. The young lady's done a nice job with her. You like her rib shape and volume. She's a sound structured female. The feet point ahead. Really good entry for that young lady. Let's give her a hand.
So we got a little trade-off in this pair of Maine steers. The deceptive part about this steer is how unbelievably powerful he is. He's big backed, tremendously big hipped. Would I trade off his flank shape for the one that stands second? Yes, I'd like to drop this one down in his flank. I like his freshness of his front. I like the way he gets in motion. Now, he hasn't been cooperating at all, and I wonder how he is in his top line. He tends to want to get up in his loin just ever so slightly. He doesn't do it when he relaxes. The problem is he doesn't relax very often. He isn't giving us a very good look. I like the design of his leg. I like the way he goes north and south on his front two. He sets down good, and like I said, the deceptive part about this steer is as good looking as he is, even though he needs more flank and more body today, he's tremendously big-ended and tremendously big top, tremendous amount of powder coming out of the backside of his shoulder. The steer that comes in second, I wish we could put the flank in the first place steer that we got in this second place steer. With that being said, the steer gets a little straighter in his hock for me. I'd like to drop him down in his tail head ever so slightly. And going forward, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, or at least in my opinion, to keep that chest fresh enough. I think he's okay up in the top part of his crest, but he does throw me a little extra throw away in his chest floor at this stage of the game. And again, like I said, when he parks, he's quite straight-legged on those back two. He bends them relatively good, or at least his right one, he is quite restricted on his left when he goes. The red steer is a little plainer kind of a steer, good cattle for sure, good enough in his barrel. He gets quite restricted in his forerib where he joins into the backside of his shoulder. And as I view this calf compared to 1 and 2, as I view him from both ends of their skeletal structure, he gets a little narrow between his front legs, a little narrower between his hind legs. I just like to see a little more true explosion in that steer, a little more red meat, if you will, under the hide. And then the steer that comes out next, a steer that I think needs a little more in his lower 1/3. We talked about a few other cattle today. To me, if you're going to give up that muscle, which he does, you certainly can't give up the muscle that restricts movement and the movement out of their hock and down at the ground. And I think that becomes a little bit of an issue with this calf. Structurally, the way he's designed at the ground gets him in a little trouble. Phenotypically, the way he's designed above his knee is very, very acceptable. Very good-looking calf.
Let's put our hands together for our Red Angus class winners out here. Big breed. I know we had a bunch of single entries, but if you get them back out here, there's still plenty of phenotype. There's plenty of quality and look. I think there's one that takes it a notch above. And again, probably like I said in a breed before, when you get them to that stage of the game and they're still fresh and powerful, they embody some stout cow shape, and they're just good in terms of flexibility. I think you got to run with them. Young lady with the heaviest bred will be your champion today.
Shorthorn and Shorthorn Plus heifers, please report to the makeup area. Shorthorn and Shorthorn Plus heifers, please report to the makeup area. We are going to the Shorthorns right now. In the Red Angus and the heifer side, your reserve champion is going to be Cade Sweeney, and your breed champion will be Finley Meyer. We'll move to the Shorthorns with the heifers. We are finishing up the main Anjou on the steer